I want to put a percentage on it. I think, my gut feeling tells me 55-45, somewhere around there. Edge to Damwon. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Long have you waited for my semifinals prediction and assessment. And I've thought about it a lot, and I took my time to really ponder about it, looking down, at the history of both of these teams since the last time they faced off against each other. G2 had a very easy time because G2 is the type of team that really adapts well to teams that play revolving the same pattern over and over again. We look at their Worlds run that year. What G2 did so good against Damwon was that they found a way to break their playstyle. Damwon's playstyle was greedy kleptotop, mid lane, play in isolation, and then Canyon does his best to make sure that the bot lane is not a liability. And then Nuguri and Showmaker found ways of getting advantages through klepto or just through solo killing and just CS advantages. What G2 did as a plan, which was very evident, was to make sure that the mid lane matchup in isolation can push 1v1, and also the preparation that they are the ones to blind pick the Jace was very neat too, because Jace was good into Vladimir and Kayle, and you denied the Jace of Nuguri. So this is what G2 did so well that year. They could adapt to anyone. They also had very, very good mid to late game decision making, and Damwon, being as predictable as they were, G2 was their kryptonite. Looking further, G2 went on to face, of course, FPX. And the biggest weakness there for G2 was that they had preparation mistakes. They still had that crisp mid to late game decision making, I feel. Probably they could have taken the Varos game that they played. But the issue was the 2v2 mid lane was not as strong as FPX's. And there's no shame in that, of course. No shame at all. They could brute force wins when they had Kai'Sa and Xayah. But when they didn't have those champions, it required additional steps in the early game that FPX had put in a lot of effort and time into figuring out. And that leads me into what we have today, coming into tomorrow. Damwon. This is a meta that they've been playing for quite some time. I think looking at the LEC as a whole, on G2, Europe was rather slow in keeping up. When Nidalee was a big part of the meta, Set, I think they were very quick to adapt the Lucian. That was locked in almost right away, right, by Fnatic. We all remember that. Farming jungle wasn't such a big deal over in Europe. Fnatic tried to pull it off, but during the regular season, Fnatic was very weak. Very, very weak. In fact, terrible. By their standards. They were saved by 10.16. Evelynn became strong, Hecarim got buffed, and everything the Fnatic were trying to do made more sense. The reason I'm bringing this up is I think this is Damwon's biggest strength coming into this matchup. The fact that they've been playing this style for a very, very long time. I think in terms of fitting in the mold that we see as the meta, I think Damwon places there super, super well. The same way FPX placed super, super well in the previous meta that they won the World Championship in. Very, very hard on the 2v2 mid. Fake pressuring, getting mid prio, diving, getting mid prio, diving. They were very, very good and precise when it comes to this playstyle. This, of course, is still relevant today. I think all four top teams really, really put a lot of effort into thinking about this. Usually after a team wins a championship, the qualities that they have become the norm. In the sense that any team that has aspirations of winning a world championship is going to take that information and try to make it their own. Same thing happened after MSI. G2 brought something to the table that was so unique. They were so free-flowing, they were like water. They had the pike top, they had the different picks, and the adaptability within the game really put them a large level ahead of everybody else. If you take a look at that best of 5 between them and SKT, some of the decisions they were making really, they were running laps around SKT's head. And SKT didn't play bad. SKT was good. They were looking good during this MSI. But G2, of course, won. After that was achieved, it was an eye-opener for everybody. Same thing as last year, 2018, when everyone started playing AP mid lanes. Teams look at winners and begin to chase them, right? Same thing after 2019. The emphasis on the 2v2 mid was very, very clear for G2. This is something that they put a lot of effort into figuring out throughout the year. They had this 1-year plan in order to make sure that they are prepared for the World Championship. And I think from an outside perspective, you can see that it's working as well as it possibly could. G2 are ramping up exactly at the right time, and I'm hoping they don't feel tired. The big question coming into, of course, the Genji match was how much can they improve over the span of a week? And when you have that much experience, being the most experienced roster out of all the teams that are left, 1 week can mean so much. Because some of the issues that you need to solve, you've been there before. I can recognize this as well when I begin to work with sometimes the same team. Some of the issues that you need to solve are issues that you've solved in the past. Those pathways are already done and made. If Jankos and Perks are underperforming group stage, these are the type of players that you easily put faith in terms of correcting those mistakes and learning from this mistake. And also G2 as a team as a whole. Because from outside, we've always, everyone has envied the environment that G2 has. That's how it seems from the outside, at least. This is a team where all players are on the same page and they can solve issues very, very well. So even in this week's practice coming into the Damwon matchup, that is something that can be very intriguing. I feel like Damwon, what we've seen is what we can expect. I think both of these teams, even though they 3-0'd, it wasn't the cleanest 3-0s. There was some back and forth, but you could feel in the games that it was never out of hand, except maybe game 1 versus Genji for G2. But all in all, it was clear who the favorite was. We saw some slip-ups here and there, Damwon with some imprecisions, Canyon being the big difference maker, just completely annihilating Bioshik, and Showmaker also performing just as well as Chovy, so there was nothing really that DRX had to offer. Same thing for Genji, Caps played out of his mind, he got a small advantage and he took it and ran away with the game. But in terms of improvements, I have higher expectations of G2's improvements in the span of a week. When they get to prepare against one specific enemy, it helps a lot. It definitely helps a lot. But the reason I made the whole story about Damwon and how you could prepare against their playstyle last year, I don't think that's the case this year. There's a line where a playstyle, if you can define a team's playstyle, most of the time that's a weakness of theirs. There's a point you reach where teams just play good League of Legends and no longer can be defined as a playstyle. And this is how I view Damwon currently. I think Damwon is the most consistent team out of all of the teams that are left in the tournament. But in a world where there's a lot of variance, consistency isn't, the thing that conquers all. When I speak of variance, the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is the mental aspect. So Damwon has been scrim gods for a very long time. And LCK, being without a crowd, could, keep in mind I say could have an impact on players. And Damwon, historically, could be one of those teams that could potentially be affected by something like this. The scrim performance has always been rumored as one of the best, and I saw it too when I was over in the LCK, of course. Even though I felt like, practicing against them in the past was different from practicing against them this year. I felt like they were more loose and they were more G2-esque in their practice, but maybe that was just specifically against us. In the middle of the season, we had about 3-4 blocks with them, meaning like 24 games. So it is not something that, defines their whole thought process behind their practice. But the reason I'm saying this is the stakes are rising. We've seen time and time again how Damwon have built up for this moment. That could be negative, right? Pressure can be negative or pressure can be good, right? But in terms of really knowing for sure who delivers under pressure, I feel like that's G2. In terms of mental, I think is natural, even though it's intangible, right? It's not something that I can measure. I'm inclined to lean to G2 having a major advantage in this. G2 are very experienced. They've been in all types of situations. Any situation you can think of, they've been in. And in most cases, they conquer those situations. And that is going to matter. That is definitely going to matter. So point G2. I wanted to go down lane for lane. I know this is kind of all over the place. I'm just kind of giving you guys my thoughts. The matchup that I want to start with was just Nuguri versus Wunder. So Noguri has performed super well. And I don't think this is the same Noguri we dealt with last year. This is not a kleptomaniac that just plays klepto all the time and plays very greedy. This is no longer the case. Noguri is a very well-rounded player. So is Wunder. I feel like if there's any weakness to Noguri is in some cases he takes bigger risks than necessary. But I think this is something that you can put on some of the other top laners that are in top 4. I think the same thing can be said for 369. The same thing can be said for Bin as well. And honestly, the same thing can be said for Wunder too. But I feel like in this World Championship, Wunder has been very consistent. Surprisingly consistent. I feel like the nature of the role top lane requires you to take some risks that are going to be, better to take than the upcoming position you will be in. Basically, you take a risk in the moment of time that you're in, meaning you take a trade, you gamble. That risk is going to be better to take than what is going to come after. If the enemy freezes or the enemy jungler is not there and he's just farming, and the nature of the top lane role is very volatile. In terms of being well-rounded and well-prepared, when I think of Noguri, I think both Wunder and Noguri play very good Camille. I would say Noguri is a better Renekton. I would say Volibear is on even grounds. Like Wunder is also a good Renekton. But this is something that Noguri has played over and over again, I think 2v2 begins to matter on how you maneuver yourself around 2v2. And I think this is where Noguri and Canyon will have an edge in the 2v2 top. I think in terms of 2v2 top, Damwon is very dangerous. If I'm Damwon, the approach I will have, because the edge Wunder has, in my opinion, is I think he's much more suited to deal with an Ornn-oriented meta. What I mean by that is European teams prepared, for example, Shen. We know that Wunder plays a good Sylas, Noguri does too. He plays Kayle. He plays a lot of champions that are good against Ornn. He plays also, at the same time, a very good Ornn. But if Ornn is out of the picture, how does it change the meta? All of a sudden, Camille, Renekton become the priority. Unless, of course, you want to blind pick Kennen, which is another thing that is good for Noguri. So that's something that I would pay attention to. I think if Ornn is in the picture, I think the champions that Wunder wants to play is better. But I think if Ornn is banned, I think Noguri does better. Because these champions are more revolved around the 2v2. When it comes to his synergy with Canyon, I think that's better. So I give a slight advantage in 2 different situations for the individual matchup in top. Which moves us to jungle. Canyon, I think it goes without saying, he's performed better. He's in the conversation for the best jungler of this tournament. I think the only other person that belongs in this conversation is SOFM. Canyon has been extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. It is weird because I think he's almost been too good, because it's at the point where he's so precise in his decision making that it has put Damwon in a position where they don't need to do much more. It seems playing with Canyon is such a freedom, because it is very hard to find any mistakes that Canyon is doing. Sure, if I check the pro views, I'm sure I can find something. But you get what I'm getting at, Canyon has been unbelievably precise. It's also, people want to talk about, oh, this is the perfect method of Canyon, but when Canyon played Set, when he played the Volibears, when he played the Lee Sin, he was just as good. He has had an incredible year. And especially summer. I think spring, honestly, I don't remember spring. So just forget. I just said summer. Summer and Worlds. He's had an amazing summer and Worlds. I don't remember spring. The reason I bring this up is because at Worlds, Canyon has primarily played one champion, and that is Graves. Graves is left open super much. He gets to play Graves. He 1v9s the game most of the time. I believe he lost one Graves game. That was with Set top and Galio mid. This was against JDG, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So the question is, what happens when you begin to remove Graves? Because that's fair. The ARX tried to pick Graves. The enemy, Canyon, meaning, the enemy was Damwon in this case. They just picked Kindred. So this is something that he has in his back pocket too. I wouldn't worry about Canyon's champion pool because, as I mentioned, he's been very good in different metas across the summer split. But jungle champions tie into the champions that your other lanes want to play. So Nidalee, of course, Canyon can play. We just mentioned the whole Noguri business with his Renekton and Camille. No problem. Graves is important because of Showmaker, I feel. The best example I can do in terms of jungle pool tying to your teammates is Selfmade. I'm sure he can play Nidalee, 100% sure. Mechanically, he is very talented. No way in hell he doesn't play Nidalee. But your teammates need to play the right champions. What's the point of playing Nidalee if you can't play set mid? Renekton, Camille top is not what you want to play. This is not something we associate right away with Bipple, right? And these are some of the questions that you need to ask yourself. What happens maybe Graves gets removed and maybe the jungle pool changes a little bit? Maybe Ornn isn't banned, all of a sudden Graves is removed. How does this shift the nature of the game for Damwon? Because many of the games they played at the World Championship have been revolving around Graves. So this is the only caveat, the only question mark that I had there. But it's not necessarily tied to Canyon, it's more tied to Damwon as a whole. Jankos has shown improvement, plays Nidalee, Lilia. It's also, I say Jankos has shown improvement, it's just G2 has shown improvement. They play more with patience, It's no longer, I did a trade that's bad top, come fix it for me. I don't care about your jungle camp. It's more about, it's more about Jankos. He has a spotlight on him, within the team. G2 as a team has developed in the way they play for their jungler. And I like as well that they've removed that role from Caps. I think that's very important. They were trying to do it in group stage where Caps has that role, where Caps is the one pushing Jankos up. But I think in reality, it should have been the side laner. Caps is a massive strength. And Caps was sacrificing a lot of lane states and lane advantages just for the purpose of checking camps for Jankos, giving information for Jankos. And in a lot of cases, it makes sense. But I think in G2's case, it doesn't because of the intelligence Caps has in terms of just winning game. I would say advantage Canyon. I don't think a lot of people would say anything else. Which moves us to mid lane. Showmaker, I think Showmaker is really, the best way of describing how, the Showmaker as a player is the best way of describing Damwon as a team. Very, very solid and very, very infrequently does more than is necessary. The reason Damwon is very precise is because they have no urge to want to stomp you or to drive you out of the game completely. No urge at all. They recognize the boundaries and the conditions they need to be in a winning position, and then they maintain that. They stick to it, and they go all the way to the finish line with it. This is something that we can't associate the three other teams with. The three other teams are quite wild, right? They are quite wild, and they are very explosive, and they can, through this, explode massive leads and annihilate the enemy team, and also at the same time look sloppy. So the terms we've coined on this channel is level of activity, lowest precision. Damwon, when they are winning, very often they are very good at making few decisions that are going to win you the game. But when they are losing, they're also very good at upping the activity. They are very, very good at recognizing their game state. If they are in a losing position, they're not just going to fall over and lose. That's why I think Damwon is tough to define in terms of playstyle, because I feel like they're just very, very well rounded. I wouldn't say that they're a slow team because they're precise, because in moments where activity is necessary to elevate their position in the game, they are willing to throw that on the table. Especially in the early game, when the game starts and the game is in an even state, they are willing to take the right risks to put themselves in an advantageous position. Damwon, as a unit, the thing that impressed me the most throughout my time in the LCK about them was, as a 5, they were very good at recognizing what is going to put them in a winning position, and when they have a winning position, maintain it and stick to it and go all the way to the finish line with it. And I think Showmaker really is the epitome of this. He's going to take risk when it's necessary, but he's not going to take risk when it's not necessary. He's not going to be the most volatile player. He understands his position in the game, and he has trust in his teammates to fulfill, the idea of Damwon. At the other hand, you have Caps, spring-loaded with dynamite. Caps takes a lead, and he's willing to take some risks. Risks that might put the game in a great position, but in some cases also put the game in a worse position. Caps, the reason I put him in my top list for mid, some people left him off of there. The reason I put him out there was, I think Caps, his vision for the game is better than any other mid laner. While Chovy might be a strong laner, his synergy with jungle, his synergy with the rest of his teammates, and his vision for the game is really not there. Chovy is not a complete mid laner. If I choose someone that is like the most complete mid laners, my list would be Knight, Rookie, and Faker. Complete mid laner. They have good vision for the game, strong laning and so forth, and good synergy with their teammates and so forth. Obviously, Rookie and Faker are, like I'm talking about when they were in their best form. I know there's going to be discussion in the comments what Showmaker has as a massive strength, I think good synergy with Canyon. Great synergy with Canyon. Also very, very strong lane phase. Very strong lane phase. But if Caps gets an advantage, he does way more than that, than most mid laners. The reason I say Knight is the most complete one is because I think he has the full package. Great synergy with jungle, great lane phase, very good vision for how he needs to win the game. Very, very complete as a player. And the reason I put... it was tough to rate Showmaker. I believe I put him 4th on my list, right after Caps. It was tough to rate Showmaker because he, as I mentioned, he's not going to do more than necessary. And I wouldn't fault him for that. He's surrounded by great players. And this is something that can be said about everyone on Damwon. Damwon is a very, very well-rounded team. I believe that's the 4th time I've said it. Let's continue lane to lane. I think Ghost versus Perks, I think they are very similar as players. I think Ghost might have a wider champion pool because Perks was very effective on Jhin. The question is what comes next. We remember the blunders from the group stage. Ghost has played Draven, a good Kalista, he plays a great Ashe. He has a very, very good champion pool and I think is very underrated by others because of the spotlight that Canyon has and Nuguri has on this team. Because Ghost, just like Showmaker, is going to do, is not going to take any risks when he's winning. And I really want to reinforce this idea that when risks are necessary, Damwon do them. I think it's important to note that even though, we have LCK versus LEC, it's completely irrelevant in this context. DRX and Genji have nothing to do with what Damwon is. Same way, Mad Lions, Rogue, and Fnatic have nothing to do with what G2 is. These two teams are heavy outliers of their region. I think the LPL teams you can contextualize and you can see a lot of similarities, but Damwon and G2, for me this is Damwon versus G2. This is not LEC versus LCK. That part is completely irrelevant. It's not LEC counter LCK, Is G2 has had a good track record against Korean teams. I think it's very important to make that distinction because these two teams are very different from what the rest of the region has to offer. Very important. We continue lane by lane. I mentioned Perks. I think Ghost, Perks, very similar as players. I think Ghost has shown a high level so far, but Perks can ramp up, right? He can ramp up, which I believe he needs to. I think his Jhin performance was wonderful. Needs to continue in the same vein. Mickey and Barrel. So we were talking about, how Showmaker and Ghost have a very specific role. Barrel plays with high variance very often. Very high variance. He is Korean Hilly-san. Many games, when Damwon is winning, you can see him int it a little bit. He is always looking for game-breaking situations. And I think this is good. I think if you want to look at the wild stallions of Damwon, then it would be Barrel and Nuguri. But Barrel more so. There's been games where he's been running it down a little bit. But it has never been a big enough issue for it to matter. There's been moments where Barrel does things that completely wins the game. For as long as I have watched Barrel, there's been many opportunities like this. Barrel is very wild in terms of his approach to the game. Like he's willing to pick Sejuani bot just to deny the enemy an AP jungle. He's willing to pick Poppy bot just to counter the enemy composition and completely sack the lane phase against Genji. He's willing to dive with Pantheon, level 1, level 2. He's very, very aggressive, right? Very aggressive. And I think Mickey has been the pillar of consistency when it comes to support. Most consistent support throughout the whole World Championship. I think maybe Core JJ is in that conversation too, but we have a smaller sample size. That's what I was trying to say. Sample size. Mickey has been very consistent. I feel like Mickey has performed at a consistent 90%, while Barrel has been like from 70 to 100, 70 to 100. Which is a very strange way to put it because Mickey has also had like 100 moments. But both players can be very, very fucking clutch. They can definitely be, the ones who decide things. And I think in the context of how supports can interact with the game, it's strange because I mentioned top 2v2, I think is in Damwon's favor. But I think 3v3 mid, I would, say it's kind of a toss-up. I think also Perks has shown moments where he's good at impacting mid, historically. But all in all, when I look at the support role, I think it's rather even. I think Ghost, I would give him slight advantage over Pearl. The key thing here, the key champion that Mickey plays that he doesn't get to show yet is Gragas. So I've been talking about Gragas a lot on this channel. Super much. Way too much. It is very good into Pantheon. And this is, of course, Battle's signature pick. And Mickey has shown that he plays Pantheon. So I really feel like Mickey is very prepared coming into this matchup. That I'm almost willing to give him the edge over Battle. Yeah, I'll give Mickey the edge over Battle. As a whole now, playstyle-wise, I already mentioned it. I spoke a lot about Damwon's playstyle, but G2's playstyle, I think, if they get over the hurdle of the early game, they get to play the game that they are very strong at. And that is the mid to late game, fog of war game. They are very good at creating suffocating situations where the enemy can make a lot of mistakes. We saw it against Genji. Genji didn't know how to control their side lanes at all. Damwon is not that. You give Damwon Twisted Fate, Camille, Nidalee, you're going to be in trouble. The same way Genji was in trouble against it, even though they were very far ahead and had 3 Drakes up and just threw the game and gave away Nash. There's definitely, G2 still have a strength when it comes to the mid to late game decision making, but we've seen worse teams take games off of better teams by simplifying the game. So you remember Flyquest against Top Esports or PSG versus JDG. These teams recognized that they were ahead and simplified the game. They didn't take any risks for additional 6 CS or an additional jungle camp. They just played around the Drake spawn timers, and there was no room for, I don't want to call it bullshit, but I think that's the only way I can really describe it. There's no room for anything out of the norm that can come and really break away the game, right? And I feel like Damwon can follow that line of thought and, simplify the game and not put themselves in any position where G2 can, pull up a rabbit out of a hat. Because this is something that we see G2 do so often. As a conclusion, before we reach the conclusion, I guess I should mention the draft. I think draft-wise, I'm curious what's going to happen if Graves gets removed. I think Ornn is in the picture, advantage Wunder. Ornn out, advantage Nuguri, this I mentioned. I think support pool better, AD carry pool better for Ghost, Mickey better support pool. Perks played a wonderful Jhin. What comes next? Played OK Ezreal. He has a lot of room to grow, and I think Perks is the right player when it comes to growth. This is a man that ramps up within a week more than I've ever seen any other player do. This man knows how to recognize, oh, this is a mistake, I'm gonna fucking fix it. I'm gonna sleep on it, and then boom, it's gone. This is, he's the GOAT of Europe for a reason. Of course, Caps is right there competing with him together with Jankos. This is the GOAT Western team for sure, right? No one comes close in that conversation. Maybe Moscow 5, but I think that's gone, right? I think that ship has sailed. I think G2 has sailed past it really easily. So G2 can definitely grow in this time span and mentally can have an advantage. There's a lot of crisscross, there's crossovers in terms of champion pool. Twisted Fate is going to be super interesting. Will they trade Twisted Fate for Sylas? Will Sylas be banned to force a Twisted Fate ban? There is a lot of champions that both of these teams play. So draft is going to be super interesting and can definitely be a deciding factor in such a tight matchup. I still think, sorry to all the G2 fans, I think that Damwon is favored coming into this. Out of all of the things that I mentioned, I think the biggest advantage Damwon have is that they've just played this type of game for a very long time. And G2 has been forced to play catch-up a little bit coming into China and after the group stage and so forth. Of course, we judge a lot G2's performance off of their games against Suning, but it turns out that Suning is an absolute monster. But all in all, I think Damwon is favored. But I wouldn't be surprised if something goes wrong for Damwon. There is definitely that question mark in the air. The mental advantage, the draft preparation, and G2 showing time and time again that in the span of a week they can get a lot better. There's also the question of competition, right? People say that Damwon didn't have a lot of good competition. But I think that's very unfair. I think DRX and Genji, what they showcased at the World Championship was not so similar to the level that they showcased regionally. I think while it's easy to point to results and talk about the results, I think, the eye test definitely, tells you a different story. I want to put a percentage on it. I think you know, my gut feeling tells me 55-45, you know, somewhere around there. Edge to Damwon. You know, from the things that we can grasp and grab a hold on to and discuss, I think definitely Damwon win out on those categories. But in terms of, you know, intangibles, things that we know about G2 but can't really, you know, measure are definitely in the favor of G2. There is a room here for consistency to fall flat. G2 is a very magical team. As silly as that sounds, it's the truth. So I wouldn't put it past G2 at all to win this series. But from an analytics standpoint, Damwon, Canyon's form has just been too good. Canyon is playing like a world champion. And jungle just happens to be the most important role. And Jankos did well against Klid, but Klid, no offense to Klid, the man ran it down in the best of 5. And SOFM, when he played against Jankos, ran laps around him. And of course, when I point to Jankos, I want to repeat, it's a team effort to jungle. It definitely is. So it's not only on Jankos. It's just that Suning and Damwon have played with their jungler as a centerpiece for longer than the other two teams. And that's super, super important. Now, you've heard my prediction. I think Damwon, if the series gets dirty, G2 is going to win. Dirty series is perfect for G2. But Damwon on paper, I think, is better. So my prediction is Damwon win. Predicting scores, I think, is stupid. But if you really want one, fuck it, just 3-1 Damwon, okay? And that means the series is super close and so forth. But I think there's a lot of variables here at play. Mental, draft, form, a lot of things. I'm slightly worried about Damwon knowing how much they've built up coming towards this day. But something that I've learned of my time as a coach, in the past I was no emotion, no bullshit. Emotions are inconsistent. But then there is a certain aspect of using emotions and being in charge of your emotions and recognizing in which emotional states you are more effective in certain things. What I'm saying is, there are certain players that play better when they're angry. There are certain players that play better when they're happy. There are certain players that, you know, when they think of something sad that happened to them, they perform better. You know, I'm just saying that emotions are powerful, and anything that is powerful can be used for you or against you. Think nuclear power, you think religion. There's many things that are powerful that can be used for good and for bad. The reason I'm mentioning it is that build-up can really set up a story of you just really unleashing on the day, right? Or it can build up a story of you really dropping the bomb on the day. And that's what's so cool about G2. I can say with confidence that coming into this best of 5, poof, they're coming to play. And that's exciting to think about. Coming into the other series, I mentioned already that I think Suning coming into like summer, you know, they go 3-0 by Top Esports. And I think Top Esports, I can say from the get-go, I think they have an advantage. But Suning have improved. And I think Suning has played with the jungle as their centerpiece for a very long time. Everyone was very excited about Karsa's performance in the best of 5 against Fnatic, but I was not, honestly. I think Karsa to me is LPL Jankos, you know? That's a compliment, you know, that's a good thing. I think he's very, very good at supporting his laners. I think Top Esports is, in a lot of ways, very similar to G2. You know, these two teams are very similar. I think there are more similarities between Damwon and Suning than there are... Like, Damwon and Suning have similarities, and I think Top Esports and G2 have similarities. Top Esports, Karsa, supports his laners, and his laners are very, very good. As individual players, they are monsters across the board. And I think game number 4, Karsa, even though he recovered beautifully with Nidalee, if you only look at the first 8 minutes of the game, Selfmade was rocking his world. But then Selfmade is casually doing Rifter. He's like, guys, I'm super far ahead, I'm doing Rift. We're going to win this game. And then his team just gives him Nidalee a triple kill. And that was like, that blew my mind. That blew my mind. Game number 1, 2, not so exciting games from Karsa. So I think that is like the point of entry. And having a point of entry already is a good thing. Because across the board, your players have been playing fucking good. Huanfeng, Sword Art, Bin, Angel, very, very good performance. It is hard to define it the same way I did with the Damwon and G2 matchup, because I felt like the whole series between JDG and Suning was just a mechanic check. there were so many decisions that I disagreed with, but it turned into just a full-on mechanic check. And it was so tough to follow the flow of the game because it was just fight after fight after fight. And every fight is just a skill check. And Suning were winning in those skill checks. They had the better draft to do so, and they had the better players to do so. And coming into this match, I know it's going to be an absolute bloodbath. But I feel like in terms of skill checks, Top Esports can roll a lot better than JDG. Suning, still, the story of their summer has been improvement, but I think Top Esports is favored. I think we're going to have a Top Esports versus Damwon finals. But I wouldn't be surprised if something else happened. In other World Championships, it got me thinking because this was a very, very tough one to really decide on in terms of predictions. Past World Championships, I felt like it was much easier to make predictions in the semis. Last year, FPX, actually, what did I predict between FPX and IG? I might have predicted IG. Was it easier? Anyway, that's for another video. I hope my ramblings make sense. Forgive me for being all over the place. You guys, these videos are like an invitation to my mind. And the information is a bit unfiltered, and sometimes I can also understand that it might be unclear. And if anything's unclear, please leave a comment below, and I'll try to, specify what I mean and discuss what I mean and go into depth about what I mean. But I think either way, as a fan of good League Legends, I am so excited. And the fact that we have Damwon versus G2 as a best of 5, and whoever is going to play against Suning on Top Esports, that alone is super exciting. Because you have Damwon and G2, heavy outliers of the region. These are teams that don't come around often. The moment, I have lost against G2 many times, but the moment this roster disbands, I will be ready to shed a tear, because a team like that doesn't come often. And Damwon, I can say the same thing. Anyhow, that's it for this video. I know you guys waited for a long time. I hope it did the wait justice. I wish you all the best. Take care, bless you, and bless your face if you sneeze during this video. What do you think of my new haircut? I feel fresh. Yeah, peace.